Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the EB-5 show. I am your host, Vivek Dundon. I am a registered representative of Sequence Financial Specialists doing business as Invest America. Broker-dealers and their registered representatives in the US and SEC and the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. I also happen to be a California licensed lawyer. As an EB-5 financial professional, I've worked with over 300 clients in the last 9 years, advising them on various EB-5 regional center investment opportunities and assisting them with project selection. As such, for quite some time, I've been wanting to provide a platform for the most important participants in the EB-5 program, current and prospective EB-5 investors and industry leaders to come together and talk about EB-5 investing from a diverse yet aligned perspective. Hence, we're launching this show by inviting you to join us on this journey that is going to lead to learning, reflection, and action. Please bear in mind, these discussions are meant for general education, are not solicitations of securities, and do not consider the situation of any particular investor. The perspectives of the participants and myself are those of the respective individuals and do not represent the positions of Sequence or Invest America. My very first guest today needs no introduction. I've known him for pretty much the entire duration of my participation or involvement in the EB-5 industry. In fact, he and his executive team took me under their wings and taught me the ropes of the regional center perspective of EB-5. We're starting with Pete Calabrese, CEO, CanAm Investor Services. Pete, how are you?
I'm good, Vivek. How are you?
Good. We're just getting ready for the holidays, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great time of year, and I really appreciate this platform. I think that this is a great educational format that you're providing to people. And as how in what high regard we hold you and our long-standing relationship together, and the tremendous success that you've been able to bring to your clients and the work that you've been able to do with us is really just fantastic. So thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you here today.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you. Thanks for those kind words. So, to start things off, I always talk about, everybody talks about projects, but I think very few people talk about the people. So I really wanted to focus on the people aspect of EB-5. So before EB-5, what was your position? What were you doing? What's your background? Please inform us.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate that because really, EB-5 is, even though it's for so many of our clients, it's the biggest investment that many of them will be making. It's absolutely the most personal investment that they're ever going to be making. So that interaction between people is really at the core of a great relationship and a successful venture in the EB-5 world. So just to kind of where I came from, I would say it's atypical, but really, I think that everyone who comes into EB-5, for the most part, comes from fairly unique circumstances because EB-5 really is that really unique marriage of immigration and securities that brings forth this very unique immigration-linked investment. So for me, I came from more of a financial background. So my background, I worked in financial markets. I started working on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, where I worked in brokering and trading equity derivatives, as well as index derivative products. I moved to another interdealer broker where I stayed at for quite a while. And then I moved into the advisory world, where I worked for an investment advisor firm for a bit. And then I found myself in the middle of my career and seeing the things I enjoyed about it and the things that I didn't. And I was presented with the opportunity by a friend who I had worked with long ago in some previous brokerage experiences, who was working in this industry, brought me in, and I started working at CanAm about 10 years ago, and I've been working at it since. So EB-5 really is just a truly just engaging. It's just a really interesting business to be in, not just because of the product itself and this immigration and this investment quality that goes into all of these sorts of things, but the people that we meet. The people that we meet and the stories that we get to hear of people's backgrounds, what they have done in their lives, which is most often just tremendous and phenomenally interesting, and the success stories that we've heard from our investors, but also just really endearing because so often the people who are coming in and the people who we're working with are all doing this for fantastic reasons. They want to come to the United States. They want or they want to have the more appropriate, I'd say, they want their next generation of their families to be here in the United States, whether it is through their whole family coming and immigrating, or through potentially one of their children who is interested in staying, living, working in the United States, going ahead and doing that. So I would say it's an atypical journey that's brought me into EB-5, but I would say if you talk to a lot of people who have been reasonably successful in EB-5, they probably come from some other fairly unique backgrounds as well.
Great. Thanks for that. So now, why CanAm? You obviously made a career move. You were already in New York. You were already on Wall Street. I'm assuming you had options and you had, many folks looking at you and you were looking at many folks. So why CanAm?
I mean, CanAm really, with limited knowledge of the market and the different participants into it, I looked and I said, these guys are tremendously successful. And it was interesting is when we came in is CanAm has always been tremendously successful, with our track record of immigration approvals, with our track record of repayments, but not too many people seem to know about it. So when we came in, myself and some of our colleagues that came in really were saying and looking and we're like, I don't think that there's been anyone that's really been able to accomplish some of the things that we have. And looking at and seeing how much tremendous success there had been, we really wanted to be able to accentuate that and to demonstrate it to others and be able to tell our story to more and more people. So, finding and learning about CanAm and our history and how much success really, to me, said, well, if you're going to go into this industry, this is the type of firm that you want to work for. And nothing in my 10 years has changed that opinion. It's a tremendous place. We've been able to do a ton of great things for our clients. And it's really just a great place to be able to work and continue in our career.
I'm glad to hear that. So we talked a little bit about the past. And of course, you've been at CanAm, as you mentioned, 10 years. So what does the present situation looks like, CanAm vis-a-vis the EB-5 program?
I think it's just a tremendous time in the EB-5 program. I really do. Taking a step back to, the last few years, there has been a lot of, it's been a fairly chaotic time in the EB-5 program, right? Between the changing of legislation, between the lack of agreement between different political parties, which basically led to the 2021 lapse in the program, which was absolutely a pretty tense time for everyone, for ourselves, for our clients, for everyone involved in the program. But what came out of that, the Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, has really brought with it tremendous value and opportunity for people who are looking at the EB-5 program, both investors especially, but also for regional centers like ourselves who are able to work and participate in the program. Because while the beginning parts of the rollout of the Reform and Integrity Act, had some turns and twists that were not fantastic, we've gotten to a much better place, I would say, in the last year or year and a half. And now that some of those improvements have really started to get seen and they are more and more apparent to investors, I think it really just makes for a tremendous opportunity for investors who are looking at it now. Between the advanced levels of due diligence that is now necessary.
Hey, Pete, so why don't you walk us through sort of CanAm's past, present, and future in the EB-5 industry?
Yeah, no, thank you. So, CanAm has been working in immigration-linked business investments for over 35 years at this point. Our founder, still president and CEO Tom Rosenfeld, started the company working in the Canadian version of their immigration-linked investments in 1987. So working and running the company since. In the early 2000s, we transitioned to the EB-5 program, which we've been working exclusively in since. We have over 20 years working exclusively in the EB-5 program. At this point, we've now sponsored 72 EB-5 projects. We've raised over $3.5 billion of EB-5 funding. We have over 5,400 individual I-526 or I-526E petition approvals, which amounts to about 15,000 conditional green cards administered to our clients. Any of these near the top of the industry in terms of their level of accomplishment and things that we're very proud of. But where we really differentiate ourselves, we have over 2,800, close to 2,900 individual I-829 petition approvals, which amounts to 8,000 unconditional green cards administered to our clients. And we've repaid $2.27 billion of full repayments to our investors, far and away the industry leader in terms of its level of accomplishment. So, I mean, these are things that we take a lot of pride in. It's a big part of how people look and how they help to determine what the right regional center would be for them. But it certainly doesn't mean that we now expect people to just go without any sort of other factors that they're looking in when they're looking at the investment project. So I mean, in terms of our past, we have a huge and tremendous track record that we're very proud of. But in terms of where we are now, we are continuously looking at and making sure that we wouldn't put out a project that we feel absolutely comfortable in terms of bringing it to our clients and offering it for their investment needs. Because one of the big changes that came with the new Reform and Integrity Act was the need to the ability to structure projects in different locales, such as a high unemployment area versus a rural area versus an infrastructure layer project, that would have some different either allocations for the visa program, for the visa set asides that go along with it, or potentially different benefits that go along with it, like priority processing for a rurally designated project. So now for us, we need to make sure that we took our time and got comfortable with these different types of projects, because we had been working in the previous form of the program, again, for close to 18 years at that point, and had gotten very comfortable in terms of structuring a good, likely urban area project. So for us to be able to offer some of these projects and these set asides, it took us a little bit to get comfortable with it and to start working in that, and we did. So you would see when you looked at the program coming back in the Reform and Integrity Act, we took our time and didn't just come straight out trying to offer, say, like a rural area project. We didn't want to move forward with this until we were comfortable with those types of projects. And this is something that we've now been able to adapt to and we've gotten more comfortable with, because for a lot of investors, especially those who are subject to retrogression, there is an added benefit and there is an added intention to want to look at maybe a rural area projects for that additional set aside amount of visas that go along with it, the 20% set aside for the rural area projects, as opposed to, say, the 10% set aside for a high unemployment area project. So that was something that's something that we look at, and we in the present we've been able to adapt to that, and we've been able to now launch, I want to say 5 rural area projects, and we've launched 10 projects with successfully filed and approved 956Fs post RIA. So yeah, we've had a lot of success in the current version of the program as well. And now when we talk about the future of the program, I think that it's important to continue to be putting forward good, strong projects. I mean, that's really all that you can do. For us, we would rather have no project than to have a project that we didn't feel comfortable with. So that's always the point that we come to. And look, we've had this conversation how many times, in that we want to be able to facilitate all of your clients. We want to be able to facilitate the other clients that are coming to work with us. But there are times when we just don't have the availability, because our projects are generally well received, and they can generally move at somewhat of a rapid pace. But the care that goes into that is what really helps us to differentiate ourselves from this.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Pete. So, look, I work with people, and so do you, helping them select EB-5 projects day in and day out. So, of course, my focus is more on, helping the clients making a sound investment decision, making a fully informed decision. But we generally have a curated list of, let's say, 10 or 12 projects across regional centers, across industries. So I have that benefit of talking to them about, a variety of options that are available out there. So when it comes to project selection for the actual end investor, that's obviously a different practice than what you guys conduct in terms of selecting projects for your own offering platform. So, you mentioned you've sponsored 72 projects till date. Just a ballpark figure, how many projects must you have been looked at, or must have been pitched to you, say, in the last 10, 15, 20 years, before you zeroed in on those 72 projects and trusting your investor clients into those projects?
A lot. And thankfully, that's not my side of the business. So I run our broker dealer, And I end up having a lot of the conversations, and obviously I work very closely with our deal team to see what we're being proposed. But there is a lot. To put a number on that, I would say probably 10 times or so the number that we've done. Now, look, what's been interesting is the last couple of years, because the combination of the return of the EB-5 program, the interest that's out there from investors, but also the higher interest rate environment that we've entered ourselves into has really kind of brought some interesting opportunities to the table. A lot of developers for whom would generally have just looked at more traditional financing are seeing that those capital markets are getting a little expensive. Maybe some of those other different markets are getting a little bit difficult to borrow funds at, or the rates are a little bit different. And something like an EB-5 project becomes a little bit more interesting, a little bit more feasible. So the way that we look to work with groups is, we're going to do extensive due diligence on the group itself. We're going to do extensive due diligence on the actual project itself. Going back to all the factors that we're looking at, really with those main goals of accomplishing the investor's full immigration status, as well as their repayment of funds. Those are the prime goals that we're looking to accomplish for them. So every decision that we're making and looking at those projects is with the intent of accomplishing those goals. So after doing all this due diligence, we'll basically work with this group and picking out groups that have the ability to borrow funds from anywhere, but they generally look to use EB-5 funding for its relative lack of expense. So for them, they might get a little bit of relief to their capital expenditures, which again helps to move towards a successful project. And we get to work with a group that's going to give us the highest likelihood of accomplishing those goals. So that's generally at its core what we look at. And we always just advise clients who are talking to us to make sure that you're keeping those main goals in mind. Because a lot of times people will be having conversations with them and they almost treat it as a foregone conclusion that, well, obviously I'm going to get my full immigration. Obviously I'm going to get my repayment of funds. So let me just get, into the weeds and really start to focus on the bells and whistles that go along with it, fees or returns or, monetary rates of return, these sorts of things. And it can lead you into a pathway that could divert you from having the best chance of getting those main goals. So, that's what we really look to focus on, because, an EB-5 investment, it's a very unique one. And it comes with a very valuable outcome, a very valuable return that comes with it. But that valuable return is not a monetary one. It's one that is a lifestyle one and a long-term planning option for people. So that's the way we try to explain it to people. And those are really the core tenets that we're looking at when we're structuring our projects. Is it going to meet the immigration standards? Is it in a targeted employment area, whether it's a high employment area or a TEA? Does it meet those standards that are going to allow for a very successful, not just initial project approval and that 9-5 success standing and the investor's I-526E petition, but that I-829 petition as well? Is there going to be sufficient job creation? Not just enough, with a very significant buffer that goes along with it. Because for us, we take this tremendously seriously, and so for us, these standards are what we're looking to accomplish. And we take this, and we not only do we present this, we talk to people about this, but we take the extra step of having this track record audited on an annual basis to make sure that investors can look at this and feel comfortable when they're using these factors as a determination for making their investment, that they can feel comfortable with the numbers that they're talking about. Because for us, this is the most important thing that we could present to people.
Okay, that's quite helpful. So now my next question to you is then, would it be fair to say that, when you're looking at these projects to see whether it's a project that you'd like to sponsor or not, would that due diligence be considered, say, institutional level due diligence, maybe the kind that a JP Morgan Chase or a Goldman Sachs is doing before lending money to that particular venture?
We take it very seriously, yes. And so we have our own defined deal team that is working and evaluating all these opportunities that are going through. And we'll also take third-party evaluations from different consultants in place if there is, say, a project or a industry that we're working in that we feel comfortable, but we would like to have a little bit more comfort in working in it. because for us, we are an expert in immigration-linked investments. But some of these other industries that we might work in, we want to make sure that if there is any area of doubt that we have, we'll bring in a third-party consultancy to make sure that this is the level. So to your question, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we're not ever going to go out with something that does not meet our standard. And if we have any area or any piece of this that has a little bit of uncertainty, we're going to bring in additional experts to make sure that we are comfortable in every aspect of the investment.
Okay. So, as you probably already know, a lot of people out there will talk about the anatomy of an EB-5 project. I understand what anatomy is, but I also understand what a healthy anatomy might look like. So then is it that, when you're looking at these projects for your own offering platform, how do you determine the health of that particular, project, or what are the key things you're looking for to make sure that it's a healthy investment?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we want to make sure that there is a very stable base on it, and that this project is moving rapidly towards stability, whether that is in the form of the beginning of a construction, having the permits and the different entitlements in place to move ahead with that. Whether when you're looking at something like that, if it's going to be a residential project, that there is going to be a good, strong demand for the product that's being offered in it. In some of our projects where we might be working with, say, a larger entity, we might be working with, say, like a publicly traded entity. Well, do we have not just, say, like a project level bit of security that goes along with the project, like, say, bit of collateral that goes along with that project? We're going to make sure that we get additional collateral from, say, a parent company level, and having that in place to make sure that we have extra protection for the project as well. Because for us, this is part of the reason why we will say structure a project as debt. All of our projects are working under the debt model. And part of that is because we want to make sure that we can secure more collateral. We want to make sure that we have priority in the capital stack. We want to make sure that we have a little bit more of a certainty of time frame for the project in terms of the time frame that the funds are going to be lent to the borrower. So all of these things and the model that we go with it help us to work towards that area of stability on a more rapid pace, which is going to help for us to feel more comfortable in terms of moving forward and offering this as an opportunity to our clients.
Okay, great. So let's talk about some of the successes that you're, very, very proud of, obviously, and that are kind of the benchmarks for what EB-5 investment ought to be.
Yeah, I mean, EB-5 is at its core an economic development program, right? So it's bringing foreign capital into the country, it's bringing job creation into the country, and it's bringing these tremendous high-end clients into the country who are themselves continuing and bringing a life into it. So there are successes on both of those ends. I would say from a project level standpoint, it is pretty exciting to look at something that you have or one of your projects has helped to finance and the effect that it has on a community, right? Because for EB-5 got a lot more notoriety and a lot more interest, say in the 2000s to early 2007, 2008 range when lending was tremendously difficult in the financial crisis. Kind of like how there's been some more interest that's been coming in the past few years. So for us, that was when the program started to really take off, and we were able to work with the state of Pennsylvania on developing the Pennsylvania Convention Center. That a project that probably would not have been completed, but not for EB-5 funding. The Albor, Florida train line, which is now the Brightline train line in Florida. This is a project that has now brought a privately funded railroad that is taking people from Miami now ultimately to Orlando. I mean, just tremendous outcome for that. And we've had so many different. I mean, we helped to finance the the Spiro building, which is the global headquarters of Pfizer. We've helped to work on just a ton of these sorts of buildings or just different developments that really have helped to transform these areas. And then from the individual basis, I mean, we now have, I mentioned the numbers of people that have come through, but 8,000 people and 2,500 or close to 3,000 families and their spouses and children now have full unconditional green cards. They're here in the United States, and they're here, and they're making a life here, and they are continuing to add to the economy and bringing with it all just those benefits. It's just those successes are just too numerous to name. And they really are tremendous. And the stories that we get to hear from them, and the notes that we'll get from people after when they'll go and they'll get their green card status, and the joy and the appreciation that comes when they complete this. I mean, those are priceless. And so we take those, and they really are tremendous. I mean, the success there is really just, it's what makes everything worth it. And really is the most endearing part of this job.
I agree. I think projects are projects, but the people behind the projects and the people who are financing these projects, I mean, these EB-5 investors, they've always been a joy to work with, and there's always happiness all around, especially when there's positive outcomes.
Absolutely. And think about the stories that they get to tell when they get to come and they get to visit one of these cities, and they say, "Oh yeah, you took that train line. Hey, that was that was the platform I used to get to the state." And like, how amazing is that? I mean, it's really just tremendous outcome.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, I agree. But of course, every time we have positive outcomes, sometimes we have not so positive outcomes. So let's talk about some of the scenarios that you may have run into where perhaps you had unanticipated risks, or risks that you had to really manage and deal with. What approaches can you take to mitigate that risk? I know there's no way to necessarily avoid risk, but there's definitely ways to mitigate risk. And how did you handle those situations? Having 72 plus projects under your belt, the ones where things may not have gone as planned and projected. How do you handle that piece?
Yeah. No, and these are at-risk investments, and thank you for bringing it up, because you certainly don't want to make it seem as though there is nothing but, because this is an at-risk investment, and that's very clear, as opposed to maybe some other countries that might have just more of a governmental sponsored program. So people need to be aware of the risks, and they are all very much disclosed. And so for us, how do we handle that is through transparency. We make sure that when we talk to people about all of our projects, and if there are projects that we love talking about our successes. We talk about projects that might have had complications, and this is all talked about with clients. And when we talk about the project that they're looking at, we make sure that they're fully aware of the risks that are going into this as well, because they need to know this. And it's why a lot of these conversations will be lengthy when we're having it, and it's why the onboarding will go on for months with dozens and more conversations that are going on with people. We make sure that they're aware of all these things, both through the compliance standards that we hold as a broker-dealer and that are required in terms of disclosing all of these sorts of things in our onboarding from a Reg BI standpoint. But in terms of when investors actually get to and they are reviewing the actual investment themselves, there is a ton of disclosure that goes into that PPM that they're reading, and we make sure that we go through all of that with them. And so, look, like if there's a project that might have complications, we are working with our investors on that through the entirety of it to make sure that we are still accomplishing the goals that we are accomplishing. And that's what we can do. And we talk about this with investors all the time, that these are things that they need to be prepared for. These are all the risks that we have looked at, and we answer every question going all the way through for clients. I mean, for us, we look at this as a long-term relationship that we are dealing with people. So they're going to hear about all of these sorts of aspects of the investment and the risks that go along from my team, which is more of a sales team, and this is the staff that is onboarding clients. But they are also going to be well aware that they are going to have consistent client service all the way through their investment as well. Because the last thing that we want for an investor to feel like is that they make an investment and then they don't hear from their regional center again. For us, we have a very robust investor relations team that is there to be providing quarterly updates to investors on all of their investment, the status of it, and to provide off schedule investment updates as well. Because the worst thing that can happen is, even if there is complications, which investors are aware of, that they're also not getting communicated to by their regional centers. So we are very, very cognizant of that. And we make sure that we have that team. And that team is fantastic about answering questions, because not only are they sending things out, they're there for inbound questions that are coming from people, and there to interact and to go over anything. So I think it's an area of disclosure, of making sure that people are notified, and of transparency in terms of our projects, and as well as the status of their current project. And that, I think, is how you just need to treat people. I mean, people understand that these are projects, and that investments do carry with it risk, but we are mitigating every risk as much as possible. And we are there to communicate with them and work with them all the way through the process.
Okay, very well. So, we talked about risk mitigation. So with risk mitigation comes, lessons learned. So what are some of the key lessons that you, your team, your company, or just, EB-5 industry in general may have learned from, say, past circumstances or past scenarios?
Yeah, I think it's just you have to be straightforward with people, and just tell people everything that's going in on it. And it's the easiest thing. When people say, oh, well, how should we communicate? Well, we're open and we're upfront about telling people about the current status of their project and about our team and our history, because, we find that, that there can be situations in the EB-5 program where because it's so small, and because people do start to know about some of the other, that people end up, that competitors or different regional centers can end up talking about each other. It's not something that we spend a lot of time doing, because I think that oftentimes we find that, like, we will get questions presented to us that it's almost as though people are trying to talk about this and that and other thing. We say, yeah, we're happy to talk about it. And more often than not, if we're talking with a client, they probably have heard anything that is happening or has happened with CanAm from us directly first. And we also remind them that we're very happy to talk about anything that has happened in the project, but we're also happy to talk about our successes as well. And
Sure.
I think for us, it's a level of, again, transparency, and just in terms of projects, to make sure that there are all of the, in terms of dealing with clients, transparency and being forthright. In terms of our project structuring, again, we're going to make sure that we are securing all the available securities that are in place to make sure, or better said, safeguards in place for these securities, to enable our investors to have as much safety with their investment as possible, in terms of collateral and in terms of immigration benefits that can be secured through job creation and other parts of the investment itself.
Sure, absolutely. So it sounds like to me, some of the key lessons that are to be learned in the EB-5 industry just come through experience. If you've experienced 70 plus projects, you know what not to do next, what to do next, and perhaps how to make the next offering even better than the previous offering.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then with that in mind, where do you see, one, the EB-5 industry, and two, CanAm, and perhaps, the project selection piece, the project option piece, from here on now until, the end of, the current EB-5 program, which is, set to expire September 30th, 2027. And of course, we'll all be, rallying to make sure that it gets, reapproved and renewed. But now until that time, say the next, 2.5 years or so, how do you look at project selection if you were an EB-5 investor?
Yes, with the stipulation, I don't love the characterization of it ending in September of 2027. I think that it will be renewed well in advance of that, because I think that when you look at the goals that you would see to seemingly be putting out there in terms of what the new RA was supposed to accomplish, it is. I mean, there is a more diversity of projects that are being financed through EB-5, and I think that that's a tremendous thing. For us, there's not a ton of change that we're going to be looking at, and that we're always going to be looking to bring new, better projects to people. But what we've been finding, and we will to continue to just present to people, is just a balanced approach to the program. Because while you see a lot of people that are talking about only having rural, or you have to have this, or you have to have this, and there's a lot of self-interest that goes into it. And like we have been able to, as a third-party regional center, we don't have, say, the conflicts of interest of, say, a vertically integrated regional center. We do have the flexibility to offer different types of projects, high employment and rural projects, and we do. But we also take this responsibility as an industry leader very seriously. For us, we really want to make sure that fair and balanced approaches are being presented with these projects, because there are benefits to different types of projects, potentially for different types of investors, and we want to make sure that they are aware of that. We also want to make sure that, and as well as bringing out good, strong projects, that we are continuously providing a platform of education to clients who are coming through, to help to elevate the overall level of knowledge of the program, so that people who are coming in can understand it better and understand the risks, and to just continue to push forward in making it a more straightforward and a better experience for investors who are coming in. And some of that comes from our SAS as a broker in the market, and our willingness to put ourselves out there and to be subject to FINRA, SEC regulatory actions, or better said, in terms of audit potentially, which we have done multiple times and have had no complications with. But just as an industry participant, we want to make sure that not only are we bringing good, strong projects to the market, but we're also presenting a strong platform for people to understand the market better and to be able to help themselves to make an educated decision. So, I really think it's a tremendous time in the EB-5. It really is.
There's never a dull moment, right?
There's never a dull moment, but I think that for a new investor coming in, there's never been a better time for a new investor that's coming in, and I think that that's a great thing. I think that between the visa availability, the set-asides, the ability to concurrently file, it really does provide a really strong pathway for people. And, I think that that's a good thing. I hope that this makes for a nice and straightforward renewal of the program as we start to get closer to those timeframes.
Sure. And talking about which, do you see any of this changing under President Trump?
We've talked about it a bunch with this, and all we can really do is see what has happened before, listen to what is being talked about now, and make sure that we are appropriately handling it when we start to learn more in the next couple of years. The EB-5 program was, in general, well received by President Trump in his first administration. So there isn't any reason to think that there would be a different feeling from their administration going forward into this second term that he's going into. But you also have to be aware that it's a new president, and it's a president who came in and has run on a lot of different issues, and immigration was certainly one of the ones that he did. So you have to anticipate that there is going to be some change in the overall immigration system, and we all have to be as participants within this market, be aware of it and be flexible to what could come. But I think I'd say in general, I wouldn't expect there to be any sort of wholesale types of changes, but we just have to be prepared, and I think this is also where transparency is just key in talking to people and making sure that we are clearly explaining things to people if there are any sorts of different policies or different changes or really just different administering of the program as we get into these next couple of years.
Okay, great. So, I know that we'll be reconnecting in a few months to just, get an update from you on everything that has to do with EB-5. But in the meantime, any parting thoughts, suggestions, ideas for, current EB-5 investors, or perhaps, folks that are looking to do an EB-5 in the next 3 months, 6 months, what have you?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that there has been, as great as the program has been and the availability of visas and set aside visas currently file, it is makes for a tremendous opportunity. But there is also the reality that this opportunity is not necessarily going in an infinite time frame. In that there has been, there was say like a footnote on the January visa bulletin that said that there has been a there has been a large number of I-526 petitions that have come in. Now, this is not, this is certainly not a point where it says to go and hit the panic button. But what it is saying is that some urgency could be because there is the reality that some of these visa set aside categories could have a date of final action. Now, talking to industry experts, that date of final action likely won't be coming until well into next year. But it is a reality that there could be something. So, and just because if that does come into play and that does become a reality, that doesn't mean that EB-5 isn't still a good strong pathway, because it's not going to be a huge setback in terms of timing for when you go forward. But it would mean that, say, if you were subject to retrogression and there was a date of final action in those set asides, you wouldn't be able to concurrently file anymore, which is an important factor for some US based people. So what I would say is for those who are looking and they are prepared, they've been talking to a professional like you, Vivek, or they have retained their immigration attorney, they've documented their source of funds, it's not a bad time to start moving forward. I mean, I think it's a great time for the program, but it's a good time to be moving forward and starting to make those determinations so that you are able to get your priority date on the earlier side of things. Because it's never a bad thing to have an earlier priority date if you're ready. That being said, it also doesn't mean rush and put together a substandard petition and put yourself in risk of potentially having your immigration not come through because you put forward a poorly done petition, and potentially putting yourself at risk from a monetary standpoint by picking a substandard project. But I would say that it's a great time for the program. And if you are able to move forward, now is not a bad time to go ahead and do it if done correctly. So I guess there's a pretty strong disclaimer at the end of that. But yes, I think it's a great time for the program. And for those who are ready, I think it's a good time to move forward.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Pete. Thank you for your time. I'm sure the information you shared with us today should be very helpful in everybody's EB-5 decision making. And I'm really hoping that this platform provides, a place for, again, industry leaders such as yourself to just come and, again, kind of humanize the EB-5 experience and, let people know that there's people just like them, behind the scenes, working really hard to make the EB-5 program better, make the EB-5 program more viable, more attractive, and at the end of the day, deliver the outcomes that people are looking for. One being, making sure that they get their green cards, and two being that their capital is as safe as it can be.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure, as always, to talk with you.
Great. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.